Tim, and welcome to Watch You Want. Thanks for logging on. Today, we're looking at a watch that has the soul of a legend, but an identity all of its own. You're looking at the Gerald Genta Arena Biretro, this one in rose gold and tantalum. This is an exceptional watch from a company bearing a famous name. And although by the 2000s, Gerald Genta and his namesake watchmaker had gone their separate ways, that brought in the infusion of new blood and new ideas, the kind of adventurous spirit that Genta himself had defined during the heart of his career. So a little bit of history. First and foremost is the signature complication. Now this watch, featuring the jump hour and the retrograde minutes, actually draws on a complication that Genta himself preferred and pioneered when he owned Gerald Genta the watchmaker. In 1996, the company debuted the first ever combination of the jump hour and the retrograde minute. Now this little wire loop right here is a retrograde minute. It traces an arc from 0 to 60 and then it jumps back. When it jumps back, the hour jumps forward, and this little aperture you see on the dial actually preconditions the luminova on that hour disc so that when you get a new hour, you get a shining hour, no matter what. The bottom line is this was incredibly difficult to do, and in the modern era of watchmaking, Gerald Genta, the watchmaker, the company, pioneered this and perfected it for wristwatches. Previously finicky, delicate, and impractical, it became a reality for everyday use and durable in Gerald Genta watches in the 90s. By 2006, when this model debuted, not only had the company perfected this mechanism, but they were ready to add a wrinkle. Right here, you see a retrograde date. So you have a double retrograde or a biretro, hence the name of the watch. Now Arena was the nomenclature used for the sportier line of the Gerald Genta watchmaker mark, and you can see this watch certainly fits the bill. 45 millimeters on my wrist. You can see it's incredibly striking. Rose gold is a good match for any skin tone, so if you're going to have a colored gold watch that's 44, 45, 46 millimeters, you want it to have rose gold so that it blends seamlessly. And with a tantalum bezel on top, not only very scratch resistant, but somewhat more subdued, Gerald Genta does this right with the rose gold on the bottom and the tantalum on the top. It's a gorgeous watch. Fits nicely on my 6 1/3 inch wrist, 16 centimeters for those keeping track, in Sentier, Switzerland, where Gerald Genta, the watchmaker, was based. The bottom line is that this watch is cool, it's modern, it's different. It is a love it or hate it watch, and you know what? If you don't like it, it doesn't like you. It is confident, it has tremendous presence, and it looks like nothing else. If you think about how the Dodge Viper inspires love it or leave it kind of gut visceral reactions, that's what the Arena Biretro brings to the table. And I gotta say, I've seen a lot of watches in my time, and I've reviewed over 300 of them here at Watch You Want. I love this watch. I love it for its mechanical sophistication. I love it because it's different, because it feels good, because it looks different. It's not afraid to stand out, and in a good way. To do something that's not just bigger, that's not just obnoxious. It's not covered with diamonds, it's not jewel-studded, it doesn't have any weird customization, it's not co-branded with any celebrity or car maker, but it's so unique, you can't miss it, and you can't miss it from across the room. This is a standout piece. Now, there is a nice refinement that Gerald Genta adds, and that's the use of the two signature tones in delicate proportion, predominantly gold on the case. It segues to this gunmetal blue-gray tantalum tone as you approach the dial. From the bezel itself, there's a sort of dished chapter ring or rehaut that's calibrated to 60, and that slopes downward from the bezel to the dial. Now there's a partial disc in a corresponding color that's consonant with the tantalum's color, and then down here you have that same tone in a little arc at 6 o'clock for the retrograding date. You also have two separate patterns of guilloche on the rose gold of the dial itself, and then applied rose gold minute numerals on the minute track. And because it is a biretro, it's also biplanar. You have this top portion of the dial that has a distinctly gray tantalum colored tone to it with a few red accents, and then on the bottom mostly gold with a few tantalum accents. So you have predominantly tantalum tones with gold accents, predominantly gold with tantalum accents, kind of like the case itself. Look at that parallelism, and you realize that this is not just an extrovert watch, it's a very subtle, nuanced watch. The case itself features straight brushed, polished, and coined finishes on the side. Again, there's a lot of thought going on here, a lot of thought both in terms of the aesthetics and the execution, because having these contrasting polished, brushed, and coined segments is not only labor intensive, but if not treated with a delicate hand, it could get downright busy. Just like the complication itself, the retrograde minutes, the center seconds, the retrograde date, and the jump hour. And yet the dial feels open, spacious, airy. And it's the paucity of calibrations. It's these open loop-style white hands, where you do have those two hands, that keeps the dial open, keeps it visible. It's expressive without being overwrought. I really like that. Well done, Gerald Genta. On the back, you see a Gerald Genta GG1000 caliber. Now, it is based on one of the greats of high horology. This is a Girard-Perregaux Series 3000 automatic winding movement with a 45-hour power reserve, featuring what's known as a Potter, or gold-plated, highly perlaged finish. It's a pleasure to look at. It's adjusted in 5 positions and to multiple temperatures, so in addition to being finely finished and of impeccable provenance, it's also highly tuned and highly refined by the watchmaker's hand. There's a lot of added value here. And there's a lot of added value in the mechanism that Gerald Genta builds itself, the retrograde jump hour retrograding date mechanism, because not only are they able to operate durably on the wrist, an industry first, not only does the jump hour jump forward just as the retrograde flicks back, very difficult to achieve, but you can actually adjust the retrograding minute backwards and forward without any hazard to the movement. And that's a huge advantage on a watch like this, because previous retrograding minute watches, in fact many retrograding watches with any kind of retrograde indication, will not allow you to set them backwards, only all the way forward and then through the cycle again. It can be cumbersome, and if you forget the restrictions on the movement use, it can be dangerous to the machinery itself. Gerald Genta bypasses that hazard, set it forward or backward, no hazard there. This watch is incredibly unique, and it's discontinued. Debuting in 2006, it had a very short run before the Gerald Genta brand was discontinued by its new owner, the Bulgari Group. So for the short run it had, this watch was a standout. Because it was a polarizing look, because the people who love them tend to love them to death and don't let them go, this is a hard watch to find. Now, as of the turn of this decade, as I stated, Bulgari folded the Daniel Roth and Gerald Genta sister brands, located in the Vallée de Joux in Le Sentier. They folded them into the Bulgari brand itself, keeping some elements like the retrograde systems and the jump dates from Gerald Genta and the case shapes from Daniel Roth. But the brands themselves, well, they belong to the ages now. So if you want a piece of history, if you want a watch that is genuinely cool in look, feel, and mechanics, I urge you to check out this Gerald Genta Arena Biretro in tantalum and rose gold on our website, Watch You Want.